Join us on the next episode of Givers, Doers, and Thinkers as we speak with Peter Murphy from Invest in Education about new federal school choice legislation that could dramatically expand access to good schools across the country. Let's go. Welcome to Givers, Doers, and Thinkers, a podcast on philanthropy and civil society. I'm Jeremy Beer, and it's great to have you with us. We're recording on September 10th, 2025. And this season, as you may know, if you've been following along, we're focusing on innovative work being done in the nonprofit sector to help strengthen and renew American civil society, part of our homage to the forthcoming semi-quincentennial. So really happy to have with us today Peter Murphy, Senior Advisor at the Invest in Education Foundation and Coalition based in Washington, D.C., which in July, thanks to its efforts, saw President Trump sign into law historic school choice legislation at the federal level. So that's going to be our main topic today. We'll hit on lots of other education freedom and school choice stuff. Talk about where education freedom stands right now across the country and what it could potentially deliver in terms of results. Peter previously served as Policy and Communications Director at the New York Charter Schools Association. Prior to that, he served in the office of New York Governor George Pataki. Seems like forever ago when George Pataki was governor of New York. When New York had a Republican governor. And Peter helped develop the New York Charter Schools Act and School Tax Relief Program, and he was there. Peter, thanks for joining us.
Jeremy, great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
I'm really excited to have you on because I wanted to make sure that people knew about this new legislation. It was included as part of the big, beautiful bill. It started as its own act. You can tell that story, and it was included in that bill. So I think it's important people know what it is and how it's going to work. But so first, let's start though before we kind of delve into the details of the law. Invest in Education. My understanding is Invest in Education was founded precisely to pass school choice legislation at the federal level. And you did it. These things almost never actually work, it seems like, but you did it. So tell people the story of how this all came about.
Sure. Invest in Education, under a somewhat different name, actually began in New York State.
Oh, okay.
It was state-based. And the story behind that was that there was an opportunity to pass legislation for the state of New York out of the Albany legislature and then Andrew Cuomo, who was governor. There was a lot of interest. And New York is a place that really has a long tradition of religious education. There's a robust Orthodox Jewish community in the state. One of the most prominent religious leaders, the Archdiocese of New York, is run by a Catholic cardinal, a very prominent individual. Cardinal Dolan is the current occupant of that office. And there was a lot of interest in doing something there. And we came very close to getting legislation passed because of that kind of historic legacy that religious education has in the state, and a lot of bipartisan support. We fell short and really reached our high water mark about middle of the decade, 2015. Mm-hmm. And then the determination was made that, similar to the civil rights acts of 2 generations ago, you often hear school choice described as the 21st century civil rights. And with that in mind, we came to Washington to work in Congress to bypass New York and several other states that just refuse to allow for K-12 educational freedom, and for purely political reasons. And that's just unacceptable. And so Congress, like it did earlier generations, had to really do something to overcome those state level obstacles for purely political reasons, not financial, certainly, not on an education basis, but for political reasons. So we were then focused starting in 2017 and President Trump's first term. And it was an uphill slog. There was not a lot of interest from either party at the time. And a lot of Republicans who are generally sort of for more competition and, freedom in general, a lot of them viewed education is more of a state and local issue, which it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there was a role to play it at the federal level, particularly using the tax code. But we can get more into that in a little bit. But we were not advocating for the Department of Education to get activists and spend a bunch of money and on a school choice program, but rather to use what a number of states at the time had, and even more have now, using the tax code to drive private sector funding of education. And we came up short there, and we sort of went dormant for a couple of years. And then post-COVID was really, it was a whole new look at this issue.
Yeah, that
after
probably
COVID.
it probably gave you a new angle, given just how
It sure
bad.
did.
It became pretty clear within 2 years, by 2022, just how bad the outcomes were looking educationally. Is that part of it?
Well, in addition, not just the outcomes, which again we've been seeing ever since, right?
Yeah.
22, 24 results.
Yeah.
But we've seen academics suffer from the school closures, and but what a lot of certainly families, millions of families, saw across the country was it's the curriculum and the lack of rigor and the frivolity and the sort of cultural issues that many parents found objectionable that were right in their own public school classroom, right? So that was kind of, I think, a new dimension to the school choice issue. Whereas before, for the 20 years before that, it was a lot about improving outcomes, giving poor people a better shot at what rich people have, educational choice. But this cultural issue and the curriculum and the political nature of a lot of education, I think was a new angle, and I think got a lot of politicians' attention, and how the system was really revealed, right? What is this public school system? It's dominated by teachers' unions, their leadership, and we've done that for 30 years, but the general public really got its first taste of what it looks like. And it was not pretty, because schools were closed, not for health reasons, because a lot of private schools, once they figured this out, reopened very relatively quickly, certainly compared to most of the public schools. So, this combination of factors, I think, really woke up a lot of members of Congress saying, you can't avoid this issue anymore. You've got to step in and do something about this. And that's sort of the genesis of kind of the 2021, 2022 effort. And we re-upped our efforts in DC.
So talk about what you were trying to let's go into the details now of what you were trying to get passed and what we ended up with in the bill.
Sure. So back in 2021, InvestedEd really sort of re-upped its efforts and restaffed, because what our board understood was that we have to be ready for the moment when this thing can happen. And legislation by design, constitutional design, bicameral legislatures, elections, legislation takes time.
Hard.
It should take time.
Right.
It's a big country. Congress only has so many days of the year, and you've got to make your case, and you've got to talk to hundreds and thousands of people. You have congressional staff that come and go. You have members that come and go. You have to build a national consensus. You have to go state by state and get organizations with their own members and followers and supporters and get them involved, because Congress is going to respond not to high-paid lobbyists to pass something, especially on an issue like this, which, has opposition, right? It has, you've got to make your case. That takes a lot of time. And so our board understood we got to start this now. We got to start over and member by member make the case for this. And that's what it was. It was a slog. It was one member at a time. And there's a lot of education that goes on. And at the same time, we're talking to members here, we're getting their constituents, talking to them back home,
Right.
and which is just hugely important.
Yeah.
And I guess one of the encouraging things that I've come away with is that voters still matter. Merits still matter. You know, people get very cynical.
Yeah.
You know, it's a cesspool and it's a swamp,
Right.
you know, and
Right.
in some ways it is.
Yeah.
Okay. But believe it or not, the
Yeah.
merits still count. Voters still count. And I think that was shown here because you couldn't do this in the swampy fashion. You couldn't just do this with, you know, throwing money around and again, paying a bunch of lobbyists. The politicians did this because they were convinced it was good policy and that enough of their voters wanted it to happen. And we made that case over 3 to 4 years. And
the name of the bill at that time was the ECCA, which
the Educational Choice for Children Act. So
right.
So we teamed up with Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana. He was in a good position because he was ranking member on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. He was also a member of the Senate Finance Committee. And the Finance Committee is actually the committee of jurisdiction, as is the House Ways and Means Committee, because what we were pushing was a tax bill. It was not, we weren't changing education law.
Yeah.
We were changing tax law.
Yeah, it's just we haven't said this yet explicitly, but it's a tax credit. That's what this law provides for. So maybe you can go into how that works.
Right. So what 22 states have right now, and what we modeled this after, was also something that was proposed by Senator Marco Rubio a dozen years ago when he first came to this U.S. Senate. Betsy DeVos had proposed this as Trump's first education secretary. So we were building on that foundation, but also what was effective in almost 2 dozen states in the country. So this was not some new esoteric thing. I mean, it was unique in some ways to the Internal Revenue Code, which is where it sits. But it's a model that was proven to work effectively. And that is, if you give taxpayers a financial incentive to donate to C3 organizations, not-for-profit organizations, called scholarship granting organizations, which already exist. There's probably at least 600 in the country, give or take. And they in turn have more money to award scholarships to more children. So it expands opportunity. And it's sort of a multi-step process. But ultimately what this is it's private. You're generating private sector activity, private dollars, donations from individuals, donations from corporations, because what they give lowers their tax liability to the federal government. So it's a loss to the federal treasury, but it's private money that's doing the funding. And that's really important particularly for any, certainly private school that doesn't want the government entanglement. You know, with government money comes potential strings and mandates. And this avoided all of that by having a multi-step process. So for instance, you have a mortgage interest deduction on your house. The government can't come in and tell you what color to paint it. Right. Because it's your money.
Right.
Now there's certainly zoning laws, but it has nothing to do with mortgage interest deduction. So the point being, generating more private support of education and parental choice was the model. We made that case, and a lot of members were skeptical. Well, I don't want to get involved in it. You know, I don't want to. We want to remove the Department of Ed. Well, the Department of Ed is even in the bill, not one syllable.
Yeah.
So that was the sort of case we were making. And a lot of members had to be brought into a comfort level that this was a legitimate vehicle, and the tax code's used for a lot of things like this. This is, I mean, if we're going to generate economic incentives to drive job creation, capital formation, depreciation schedules accelerated, why can't we fund scholarships for children to go to a better school and get out of this school that's been lousy for 20 years and where their kids are getting bullied? You know, like that was ultimately became the argument that prevailed.
So I live in Arizona. We've had these sort of
Yes.
private school
The
tax
model
credits
for the nation.
through school. Right. I think it started in Arizona. Was the first
It was the
ones,
first
maybe.
state to do
Yeah.
this approach.
Yeah.
1997, they did the
Right.
first scholarship tax credit in
Yeah.
that state.
You give. What happens is you give money to a scholarship granting organization. They're called here often school tuition organizations.
Yep,
Um,
STOs. Yeah,
and then you get, and then that organization can make grants for scholarships to students to help them afford the cost of a private school. And you get a dollar for dollar tax credit for how much you gave off your Arizona state taxes. So I give
right.
$1,000 to a school tuition organization. $1,000 comes off my tax bill, not my income, my tax bill, dollar for dollar tax credit. Is it going to be the exact same way with the federal tax credit? And up
Right,
to
up to $1,700 a year is what you could do
Mhm.
at the federal level. Now that was sharply lowered
Yeah, what
by
did
the
you guys
Senate.
want? What were you trying to get?
Well, we wanted
As high as
an
we can.
incentive up to 10% of your tax liability
Okay. Yeah.
to be able to use. And
Mhm.
the reason for that, why that was where that was proposed by Senator Cassie, and by the way, in the House we had Congressman Adrian Smith from Nebraska, who was a senior member of the Ways and Means Committee. So and the child of public school parents, and great background. So between Dr. Cassidy in the Senate, Congressman Adrian Smith in the House, we had some really good leadership on the subject, along with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, Burgess Owens of Utah, really leaders on this issue, Byron Donalds, others, Jim Jordan. So, so the original proposal had both corporate deduction and an individual income tax deduction that was up to 10% of your AGI, your adjusted gross income.
Yeah. Okay.
Meaning if you had, if you made $100,000, you could donate up to $10,000.
Wow.
To a scholarship granting organization. If you had $1 million a year, you could donate up to $100,000. Now, of course, one of the sort of knee-jerk reactions you get is, that's a tax break for the rich. Well, importantly, in your case, you mentioned the Arizona example. You were still out the $1,000.
Yeah, it's gone.
That did not accrue to you, nor did your child benefit.
Right.
You were out the money. You didn't benefit financially. You didn't profit from that. You were simply a vehicle by which we supported children's education through scholarship grants. So that's sometimes gets lost on people that, we want wealthy to be donating and participate, because the more the wealthy
goal.
donate, the more kids who benefit.
Yeah, that is the goal.
And they're no better off, because either they're going to pay the entirety to the Uncle Sam,
right,
or they're going to put part of it toward school choice and parental empowerment.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, now it's $1,700, but again, we were trying to make the case
right. You
that
were getting,
we're getting some blowback on that, and I think we were able to bring a lot of people to a comfort level that you want rich people to step up and donate, and it's not about them. It is about the children who get the scholarships now, because of the kind of Senate parliamentarian sausage making and an effort to salvage a bill back in early July, late June. This compromise came out of $1,700 per taxpayer, and what that means is, look, it's still going to generate a lot of scholarship money for children, but it's a lot more people that you have to reach to get the kind of volume to fund more children. So that's just something we have to deal with going forward.
Do you have an estimate on your side at how much this might generate into these scholarship granting organizations?
It's so hard to come up with that. Now, the Joint Committee on Taxation, at whatever it was, 11 o'clock at night, or 2 in the morning, whenever it was, threw a dart against the wall and said, no, I'm like it. They're actually really hardworking. That's the one thing when you deal with Congress, you're dealing with a lot of very smart and energetic and hardworking staff and members. And so they came back with like a 9-year proposal of, $26 billion impact. And again, estimates are hard to make, especially on something like this, because there's so many variables
Right.
How quickly are SGOs going to surface? How quickly are they going to be finding people
Mm-hmm.
to donate? And so it's a hard one to come up with. But that was look. I think you could get to several $billion a year
Oh, yeah.
on this, and effectively, increase the amount of private sector options for families in a fairly short amount of time. But it's going to take some time, because there was another very important caveat to the final version of this bill, and that is that the parliamentarian in effect forced a requirement that was enacted as part of the final product that said every state governor
Right.
gets to decide whether their state's children benefit from this.
Yep.
It's called the opt-in approach, that every year, not later than January 1st, every governor has to, the way you opt in, the way you allow it to take effect in your state, is to submit to the Treasury Department a list of scholarship granting organizations in the state that can receive donations that get the donor a tax credit.
Right.
And the simple sort of ministerial function is, if you want this to take effect, you have to list every SGO, every granting organization that complies with the federal law. You can't discriminate. You can't pick your favorites. You can't pick ones that only help public school kids or charter school kids. So that's in the law as well. And what that means is that sort of defeats one of the goals of Congress bypassing recalcitrant politicians at the state level. Now, the one sort of silver lining is it's not the legislature and governor. It's not two houses and the governor. It's one person.
Yeah.
One individual decides this. And so there's efforts even now underway to not, my advice to people on that is, don't presume what your governor is going to do or not do. Make the case. There is a very strong case to be made here. One of which is, it doesn't cost the state anything to opt in. And
these are federal dollars.
The losses at the federal level, right?
Right.
The revenue loss. But it's also, if you don't opt in and your state sits this out because the teacher unions, ordered you to, which they will do. Yeah. They will do it, everywhere they can.
They do not like these. Yes.
Right. And they're used to, throwing, ordering politicians around. If you don't opt in, your state's taxpayers can still donate to an SGO in a state that did opt in. So you're going to see your state's dollars go to finance children's education somewhere else. And the other reason that really any politician should opt in is all children benefit here. You don't have to just be choosing a private school. You could be in a public school, get a scholarship, and hire a tutor. You can buy. That's
interesting. Let's kind of pause on this and make sure people understand it. Yeah, it's not. You do not have to go to a private school to benefit from this.
That's right. And that scholarship granting organization, and a lot of, I know from my home state, New York, most school districts, I'm convinced, had fundraising arms. They had private, they had C3 separate entities, but they were, the board was there for the benefit of the kids in that school district.
Right.
They had fundraisers every year. They had a night out and whatever it was, they raised money. So in this instance, you could have a scholarship granting organization set up to give scholarships to children who attend schools in that school district. That's entirely allowed under this law. And so when people say, well, so when you sort of fall back, you've already seen this in the media. The governor of New Mexico, well, this takes money from education. Like they parrot these shop-worn talking points that are fed to them by the teacher union boss. And it's never been true, and I can document that. But in this case, it's absolutely false.
Yeah, there's really no way we can argue that.
Right, because you're not losing money. In fact, the opposite is true. Public education is going to get more private support from this law, as are parents who choose to go send their children to private schools. Everybody benefits here.
Hi, I'm Chris Kittemeyer, CEO of AmFell. I'm excited to share that this season of Givers, Doers, and Thinkers podcast is sponsored by AmFell. Whether your nonprofit needs help raising major gifts, building your donor pipeline, or crafting a winning fundraising message, AmFail has the expertise to help your organization thrive. We work with mission-driven organizations across the country to help them raise more money and advance their mission. Learn more at amphil.com. That's AMPHIL.com.
So a public school district could set up its own SGO and invite people
That's
to
right.
make donations to SGO to support, like you said, tutors, maybe qualified extracurricular things, whatever it might be for students in that district.
Correct. The one little nuance is that you can't raise money to fund a greenhouse, right? Or fund a field trip. You could raise money to give in the form of a scholarship to a child.
Got it. It's got to go to select a kid. Yeah.
Yes, and to select an expense, an eligible education expense that the SGO decides. An SGO is not obligated to fund any education expense. The SGO decides we're going to fund tuition to these schools. We're going to fund tutoring. We're going to fund equipment or something.
Yeah, right.
So it's really an enormous injection of new revenue stream to the public system. And look, a lot of parents are going to want to stay right where they are.
Right.
Their public school works for them. But there's some there's some years where at the margins, this could really help keep a district from having to raise property taxes. And instead, look, why don't we do it this way? Any savvy superintendent, principal, executive of a public school district, board members should welcome and embrace this. And I think eventually they will.
Right.
They just have to stop being they need to stop being the stooge of the teacher unions and take second fiddle to them, which I see in New York. I see that all the time.
Well, I'm sure you do. And what I see too is there's just not that kind of entrepreneurial mindset necessarily present among district schools. Or school districts. Now, not all. There are school districts here in Arizona, for example, that have supporting foundations. You've mentioned they raise money to help pay for all sorts of things that taxpayer dollars, there's not enough of them to do. Extracurricular activities to help teachers buy things for the school classroom, all sorts of great stuff. But it's always amazed me that they don't do it more. They don't really lean into that. There's no reason school districts can't act entrepreneurially to raise more money for what they need. And this is here's a golden opportunity to do that for kids who go to your school, even if you're a public school.
I guess there is one interesting dynamic looking forward, looking ahead at this, how this bill rolls out, is to what degree that will happen. I think it will happen. It's just a question of when does the dam break?
Yeah.
And the superintendent, the administrative side, the governing side of public education realizes that how well this can be used. And we've got to put kids first, as opposed to this ideological opposition that you get from teacher unions, that everything's a threat. And really what a bill like this does over time, and it shifts the power dynamic by making more parents customers. And that power dynamic shifts from teacher union bosses to parents. It sounds sort of hypothetical and theoretical, but that's why the teacher unions oppose it. That's what they're afraid of. Not afraid of losing money. They don't want, but it's a power thing, is what it is. And they won't admit that. They'll just cry that poverty.
But I think, as you pointed out, 2020 to 2022 kind of revealed some of the truth behind what you're saying there and what we saw during that time period.
Like who runs things and
what they were doing
and who put and what interests are being what interests what interests take priorities. Absolutely. That was hugely revelatory. Is that a right word? Revelatory.
Yeah, revelatory is
hugely
a word.
revealing. And the legacy is not just this legislation, but you've had up to about 24 states either create or expand. Arizona went universal.
Yep.
I think in 21 was it? Or 22? They were the first.
Just 22, I think. Very recently, maybe even 23.
Exactly. So what's happened is, if you look at the numbers from say 2019 to 2024, the the number of children in benefiting from a state private school program doubled. It's like it added like 500 to 600,000 children came on board. And by the way, at the same time, public education spending went up in state after state after state. This was, I've seen this in surveys from the National Council of State Legislatures. Even as school choice was accelerating in state after state, school district spending went up, including a massive infusion by the federal government during COVID. $190 billion above baseline was added in the early part of this decade, spent over several years, and scores still went down. I mean, it's always been.
That's going to be my next point. And the return on that, we just see the nation's report card just came out on September 9th. That's yesterday. And this is the nation's report card. For those who don't know, is what they call this sort of report of the results gathered by the National Center for Education Statistics on something called the NAEP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, something like that. Is that the NAEP stands for?
National Assessment for Educational Progress. That's right, NAEP.
And the score, I feel like it's Groundhog Day with this. I mean, it's always either staying the same or getting a little worse. And as you say, that's with public school spending going up. Now, because the other way to look at that is that so far, getting more students into choice programs isn't making a dent in the scores. Now, this might be a good point to point out that, what percentage of kids still go to public district schools? It's still quite high.
Yeah, it's close to, if not 90% of the public. And again, there's now 1.3 million children on a school choice. Getting a school choice benefit, either a voucher or scholarship, or an ESA, an educational savings account, is kind of the new that a lot of states did. And a lot of those children are in your state of Arizona and Florida. Like that may be 40% of that number by now, maybe more. I think actually more than that. So Arizona and Florida have been the flagships. They've been the leaders in this. There's hundreds of thousands of children now between the two states. And what you're seeing in Florida, I know this has been documented. There are studies that show that public school results in Florida are getting better because
that's interesting. So there's competitive pressure being applied to them. Is that the idea?
It's reached a real critical mass. That they're competing for children now. And Arizona's been advertising and marketing their public schools for a long time for the same reason. Parents are customers in those states, unlike anywhere else in the country.
That's actually one of the questions I was going to ask you. So I'm glad you brought that up, because ultimately that is the goal here, right? I mean, some people, the goal might be simply to sort of empty the district schools. But it seems to me the more sort of realistic and positive outcome would be just that they have to provide a product that parents want, and parents don't feel sort of know that they have a choice and don't feel really sort of trapped into just sending their kids to school down the street, no matter how dangerous, crazy, or bad it might be.
That's the message of school choice. That's the ultimate policy goal. Every lawmaker that's voted for a school choice bill, and certainly all the ones I talked to in Congress over the last 3 or 4 years, every one of those people support public schools. It's not an us versus them. Now, there's a competitive challenge, yes. But every politician supports public schools. They support bridge repair. They support defense. They support law enforcement, environmental protection. Like, you can do all of these things, right? And yes, the pot of money is only so big, but ultimately, all of these people support public education. They've been voting for spending on more spending every year they've been a politician. And they voted for this new law coming out of Congress. For the reason is it benefits children. And what, again, you're seeing in places like Arizona and Florida, it's benefiting public school children. Public schools have had to respond and do better. And so and in the case of this law, because it was designed to allow SGOs to serve children in any, almost any school setting. There's some limits on homeschool kids, but by and large, like, it's a win-win. It's for all children. It's not selective.
But when does it take effect? I think I read that it's not till 2027. Is that correct?
That's right. So January 1st of 2027, the bill goes into effect, meaning tax year 27 is when you can start donating to a scholarship organization in a state that's opted in.
Yep.
So for the 27 calendar year, which means SGOs can start raising money this way. And likely you'll have most of those SGOs, they'll have their application processes in the spring, and it'll be really for the 27-28 school year. Mm-hmm. But of course, an SGO is not precluded from, if they get more money in the door in January and February, children can leave school in mid-year if that's what their parents want to do. So as early as 27, and that's, look, we didn't particularly like that delay, but there's a lot of rulemaking involved. There's a lot of setup to get this right, to prepare the ground, to line up donors, to get governors to opt in. So all of that takes time. There's a lot of parallel tracks underway even now. And so, we intend to spend the next, 15 months wisely in preparing for it.
Well, we'll get a new Congress in 2020. Well, elected in 26. I guess it won't be seated until 27. Same with the new president. So I guess
the president doesn't come in until 29.
I'm sorry.
The next administration would be in 29.
I've cut 2 years off our current presidential administration. It seems like it's already been 3 years. So yeah, you're right. So it'll be a new Congress, but not a new president. So you think that'll be enough time to build a sort of constituency that the new president in 2029, whoever that might be, will have a little bit tougher time sort of trying to get this repealed if that was something they wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's been school choice. This should be a bipartisan issue, and I can tell you from our
used
going
to
back.
Be. I feel like 20 years ago it was, and it's become not one now.
Well, I mentioned our New York experience starting out. It was bipartisan in New York State.
Yeah.
Back then, the state assembly and the state senate, you had Democrats dominate the state assembly, 2/3 majority. We got more than half of them co-sponsoring legislation to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Back then the Senate had a Republican majority, and almost every Democrat voted for this bill on the floor of the Senate. It had been voted on the floor several times over several years that we were active in that state. Democrats know this is a good thing, and their neighborhoods, their constituent children are the beneficiaries. And you know why? Because one way to look at this is it really blends kind of the ideologies of both sides. This kind of expands freedom and competition and brings the private sector into the mix. But it's also a very progressive notion that you're equalizing education. You're giving families without means the means to access education that families with money can do, and only they can do. So,
but what happened,
every parent
Peter?
I've talked to,
what happened?
I'll tell you what happened.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what happened. The teacher unions are the system. They are the man in this.
And they got scared.
Equation.
This became too successful, basically.
They wield a lot of political.
Yeah.
They raise a lot of political money. They man a lot of phone banks at election time. They're a major political force, and this is their system, and it's about control. And look, what is the teacher most concerned about? What really appeals to them more than money? Job security.
Yeah.
That's embedded in the public school system. Again, I may have a New York Northeastern bias on this. It may not be the case across the country to the same degree, but that issue of job security, and this is a threat to your job security.
Yeah.
That's a powerful message to have. And I mean, every job I've ever had is my security is my performance. That's it. And I'm still here somehow. So that's what you're up against, and that is translated into political activity and power. And so at some point, I can tell you when it happened in New York, but nationally, they have made this political calculation. The teacher unions have the Randy Weingardens at AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, Becky Pringle at the National Education Association. They made a partisan determination some time ago that they were going to be adjuncts of the Democratic Party. And so you take a guy like Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader from Brooklyn, was a state assemblyman when we were working this issue in New York and was a supporter. He was with us on this. And even when he got elected to the House of Representatives in 2012 from Brooklyn, he was in a Democratic primary, and this issue was a topic. And he defended his support for this and still won. And yet here he is. He's the leader of a party where not a single one of his members voted for this. And now, granted, there was a lot of things in this bill, so they weren't going to vote for it as a party.
But did you have any support from any Democrats when it was just the ECCA?
Nobody co-sponsored it. Because they don't want to get their head lopped off in a primary financed by the teacher unions. That's what. So the word's gone out, and I know. I know a lot. I don't know. It's hard to put a number on how many members, but there's lots of Democrats in Congress, given their druthers, would support something like this. They know it's a good thing. They do, because I've talked to them. I've talked to. Hakeem Jeffries is not that much different now than he was then. But he's a leader of a party, and that's their political alliance, and it's a major source of support for them. And I'm not trying to cast aspersions on these people. I mean, you have to deal with political realities. And look, we had to make it. We had to demonstrate to people who did ultimately pass this bill that it made sense, not just on the merits that was good for families, but that their voters wanted it. And that was, so we made that case as well. But that's the thing to look ahead, to make this more bipartisan, to bring more Democratic support. Because look, there's been some really courageous Democratic state legislators across the country who have supported this in Louisiana, in Georgia, and elsewhere. And we just have to build on that because it is the right thing and it's better for children, regardless of where they go to school.
One more question for you, Peter, before I let you go. I think about the only downside I've been able to, potential downside I've been able to see about the tax credit, this sort of strategy across the country is more, and the ESAs, I would say even more than that. ESAs are when states give parents an education savings account, so it stands for. In Arizona, it's something like $7,000 per child to use as you wish to get the education you would like for that child. What do you have any fear about this? We've seen what's happened to tuition and the costs of a college or university education, thanks to sort of government subsidization of loans and grants.
I read,
yeah, right. Do we fear that private school tuition is going to go up by 50% in the next 4 years in states where these programs are in place? Not just your program, the federal program, but when it's stacked on top of an ESA program at the state level or a similar tax credit program at the state level. I have heard a couple of private school people say, hey, maybe we need to go up to $10,000 a year now.
So that's a great question. It's a very fair question. And I'm not here to tell you that's not going to happen ever.
Yeah. Right.
But one of the things you will see is, so right now, a lot of schools operate on philanthropy. As you well know, it's your business.
Indeed. Yeah.
And that's how they survive. What I think will happen, what should happen, is as more children get this source, as families are financially empowered to afford this, schools are going to be less reliant on traditional philanthropy and have a longer term sustainable financial plan. Now, that's not the objective here. The objective is not making schools financially sound. The objective is giving parents a choice to get the best, most suitable education for their child. So having said all that, one of the outcomes is that schools are going to be less reliant on philanthropy and many of them will be able to add programming alternatives.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That could be a real outcome here. Yeah, you could
Yeah,
add
I mean,
$1,700 per kid of stuff that you need, whether it's a
you
new
know what?
track or whatever.
We're gonna make
A
our high
band.
school
Yeah.
more enriched. We're going to add to our
Right.
science program. Well, that's going to necessitate some tuition level, but ultimately schools do have to look after the bottom line. I mean, the higher ed industry has just gone so far afield, and not everybody goes to college, but pretty much everybody has to go to K-12 or at least mostly through K-12. So there's not entire similarities, and colleges are their own. There's lots of other things going on in universities besides teaching children or teaching young adults. But so I don't think it's a purely apples to apples phenomenon. I think there will be greater competition because look, public schools aren't going away. Okay, no matter what the teacher scaremongering talking points they're using, public schools are always going to be here. So private schools is not going to take over public ed. There will be that competitive factor, and ultimately, private schools have to be safe and academically robust and produce learning outcomes where parents want to keep sending their children there. And so, if they price outrageously, there's mitigating factors. Parents can go somewhere else. I think there's a greater competitive phenomenon that you're going to have in private education, even with this thing. But again,
you're right, though. That's another thing that could happen to keep tuition down is it actually inspires. I've seen this in Arizona when the universal ESAs got passed, lots of new private options be created, which then, of course, expanded supply, help keep the cost down.
Look, it's probably a faulty comparison, but, gas stations can't be out of whack with each other, right?
That's true. Yeah. No,
I mean, it's maybe a silly comparison, but I think there's limits to what you can do. Now, if you're the only gas station within 50 miles, you're going to price more. But so I think maybe there's a similarity to there as well. But look, it's something to watch out for. And it's a dynamic that's could be a byproduct. I don't think it'll be pervasive. I don't think it'll be where this leads. And we'll sort of cross that bridge when we get there.
Well, Peter, congratulations to you and Invest in Education and getting this law passed, the new federal tax credit for K through 12 education. How can people, if they want to learn more, get involved, how can they do that?
Thank you, Jeremy, very much for having me on this. People can check out our website. It's investineducation.org, investineducation.org. My email, pmurphy@investineducation.org.
I love it.
Yeah. Happy to talk to people.
Watch this podcast that you'll be flooded. So I think you're safe in putting that email.
Well, I'm testing you now. We're gonna find out, right?
Will one person please email Peter just to prove that somebody listened to this? I would really appreciate
that. No bots, Jeremy. No bots. No, really, this has been great. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. And
absolutely. Thank you.
And for the wonderful work that your organization accomplishes all over the country. That. It's really special.
Thanks so much, Peter. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Take care.
Okay. Bye now.
Hey, thanks for joining us for today's podcast. If you enjoyed it, we invite you to subscribe or rate or review us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to our podcast. Thanks a lot.